Carl Jung documented a psychological pattern so unsettling, he called it one of the most difficult transformations in human nature. Across countless cases, he noticed the same haunting trajectory, especially in empaths. They appear gentle, fragile, even broken, until something inside them snapped. I call them the awakened ones. People who had integrated their shadow so completely, they didn't just change their own lives. They rewrote our understanding of human psychology itself. For decades, Jung studied what looked like shadow work hidden inside the lives of highly empathic people. And what he discovered still unsettles psychologists today. The kindest people aren't weak. They're weapons, waiting to be forged. From his Zurich clinic case files, Jung saw a chilling pattern repeat. Patient after patient arrived carrying the same invisible wounds. Empaths systematically dismantled by those who claimed to love them. They came with bruises they explained away. With depression they blamed on themselves. With a reflex to apologize simply for existing. These were people who had spent a lifetime absorbing everyone else's pain. Alcoholic parents' rage, a spouse's infidelity, a family's dysfunction. They were emotional shock absorbers for their entire social systems. Living proof of Jung's observation that sensitive people often become repositories for collective psychological pain. But here's the part that made Jung's blood run cold. These empaths didn't just endure abuse, they systematized it. When Jung asked about their relationships, he expected the scattered thoughts of broken minds. Instead, he found something far more dangerous. These people hadn't been shattered by cruelty. They had been studying it. They kept mental records of every person who had ever hurt them. Every trigger, every insecurity, every fear, mapped with surgical precision. And they never used that knowledge until something pushed them past their breaking point. Jung realized the empath's mind isn't a victim's diary. It's a strategist's war room, waiting for activation. If you've ever felt underestimated, remember this. I see everything. In truth, Jung wasn't sitting across from victims. He was facing psychological geniuses in hiding. Their brilliance wasn't in creating. It was in emotional archaeology. They could excavate a person's deepest wounds just by reading micro-expressions. Jung tested them. Without warning, he'd bring in colleagues and say nothing about them. Within minutes, these patients could identify childhood traumas, relationship patterns, even professional insecurities, over 95% accurate. They weren't psychic. They were simply paying attention at a level most humans never reach. What others called intuition, they called data collection. Jung began to see it clearly. Empaths don't just feel deeply, they process emotional information faster and more precisely than anyone else. Their brains are wired for behavioral pattern recognition. Yet society taught them this gift was a curse. Every time they spoke the truth about the lies, the manipulation, the hidden agendas, they were told they were too sensitive, too emotional. So they learned to doubt themselves, to silence their perceptions, to apologize for seeing what others couldn't. But truth doesn't vanish just because you stop speaking it, it builds up. And in these empaths, it had been building for decades. Jung saw the real danger. Empaths don't lose their minds from feeling too much. They lose them from being told their feelings are wrong. These weren't nervous breakdowns. They were breakthroughs. And every transformation followed the same trigger. Betrayal. Not just any betrayal. Betrayal by someone they had trusted completely. Over and over, Jung documented the same scene. The empath discovers infidelity, financial deceit, or deep emotional manipulation. The worst part wasn't the act. It was realizing they had seen the signs all along and ignored them. They did what empaths always do, stayed silent, absorbed the pain, blamed themselves, tried harder to be perfect, until the moment I call the clarity event. That instant when their pattern recognition finally overpowers their need to believe the best in people. And that, Jung understood, is the true moment of psychological awakening. Most people expect an empath's breaking point to be loud. Tears, rage, collapse. Their abusers expect that too, bracing for emotional chaos they know how to control. But what happened instead was far worse. The empaths became unnaturally calm. Jung recorded this as the moment analytical precision fuses with emotional intelligence. A psychological shift so profound, he called it the most chilling transformation possible. They didn't attack. They didn't scream. They simply began to speak truth. Every observation, every hidden detail they had cataloged in silence for years, laid bare with surgical precision. This wasn't revenge. It was clarity, not cruelty, but clinical dissection, like a surgeon exposing each diseased organ before removal. They were finally using their gift of total perception not to excuse behavior, but to expose it. Jung's notes echoed an ancient truth. There is no fury like someone who has finally learned to trust their own perceptions. He recognized this moment as shadow integration, the instant a person stops denying the parts of themselves they were taught to hide. The empath's shadow was never evil. It was their silenced intelligence, their suppressed intuition, their denied strength. And when they embraced it, they became psychologically complete. Here's what unsettled Jung the most. The transformation was permanent. They never returned to people-pleasing. They stopped apologizing for boundaries. They no longer second-guessed what they saw. They had become what manipulators fear most, empaths who could no longer be controlled. And the changes went far beyond the mind. Within months, they executed life overhauls with surgical precision, ending abusive relationships without drama, cutting toxic family ties without guilt, rebuilding their lives entirely on their own terms. They became selectively empathetic, still deeply caring, but ruthlessly intentional about where that care flowed. And others could feel it. People who once walked over them now felt strangely uneasy in their presence. They couldn't explain why, only that something had fundamentally shifted. Jung called this the predator's instinct. Manipulative people sense instantly when their tactics will fail. They avoid integrated empaths the way vampires avoid sunlight. The awakened empath, Jung wrote, does not need to announce their power. Others can feel it in their bones. If people started treating you differently when you found your backbone, you know the truth. They sensed the change before you ever announced it. Jung's fascination was more than professional. He recognized himself in these transformations. He, too, was what we'd now call highly sensitive. He knew the pain of seeing what others could not see, feeling what others refused to feel. And these cases forced him to confront a question that kept him awake at night. What happens when empaths stop being society's emotional shock absorbers and start using their gifts strategically? Jung followed them for years after integration. What he saw was staggering. They became extraordinarily successful. In business, they could read a client's unspoken needs before a word was said. In relationships, they could identify emotional predators within minutes. In decision-making, they trusted their intuitive intelligence without hesitation. And here's what made Jung's blood run cold. They hadn't become less empathetic. They had become perfectly empathetic. Perfect empathy meant perfect strategy. They could manipulate others as easily as they had once been manipulated. They understood human psychology at a level that made them nearly omnipotent in social situations. But what truly unsettled him was their choice. They didn't use this power to destroy. They could have ruined every person who had ever hurt them. Instead, they simply removed toxic people from their lives and moved on. Jung realized he was witnessing the birth of what he called the integrated empath, someone with both the sensitivity to feel everything and the wisdom to choose what deserves their energy. In his private notes, Jung wrote, "I have seen something both beautiful and terrible. These individuals have become what every manipulator fears most. Someone who can see through them completely, but needs nothing from them. If you've reached the point where you can read people but no longer need their approval, say it now. I see you, but I don't need you." And these transformations, they did not happen in isolation. Jung documented how the transformation of awakened empaths sent shockwaves through every system they were part of. Family dynamics began to collapse. Not because these individuals destroyed them, but because they stopped enabling dysfunction. Alcoholic relatives were forced to face their addictions without the empath as an emotional dumping ground. Depressed family members had to seek validation elsewhere. Manipulative siblings no longer had a psychological punching bag. Here's what made Jung grasp the true magnitude of their power. Their transformation forced everyone around them to either evolve or reveal their true nature. The healthy people in their lives grew stronger by their example. The toxic ones exposed themselves through desperate attempts to drag the empath back into old patterns. Jung saw what I call the empath's mirror effect. They no longer needed to confront dysfunction directly. Their very presence reflected it back with uncomfortable clarity. Manipulators couldn't stand to be around them. They felt naked, exposed, unable to run their usual psychological games. Meanwhile, authentic people felt safe around them. Perhaps for the first time, Jung's research revealed that awakened empaths became living truth detectors, not through judgment, but through presence. The most unsettling discovery came when Jung introduced these transformed patients to others in his practice. Within minutes, they could identify a person's core psychological wound and the exact therapy needed. Their diagnostic accuracy surpassed his own decades of clinical training. This left Jung with an ethical dilemma that haunted him. If empaths could reach this level of insight naturally, what did it mean for the future of psychology itself? He began studying more cases in secret, developing what I call the integration observation protocol, a framework to understand how this transformation unfolds organically. It wasn't therapy in the traditional sense. It was the documentation of how betrayal can forge warrior consciousness in empaths. Across his cases, Jung identified four consistent stages. Stage 1, recognition. They began identifying their suppressed shadow aspects, not just their anger, but their intelligence, their strength, their right to boundaries. They stopped pathologizing their perceptions and started trusting their emotional intelligence as the sophisticated data processing system it truly is. Stage 2, integration. Jung watched them merge their light and shadow into what he called the complete self, people capable of immense kindness toward those who deserved it, and ruthless precision toward those who didn't. Stage 3, application. This fascinated Jung the most. They began using emotional intelligence strategically, not just defensively. They became psychological architects, able to read, influence, and navigate human systems with almost supernatural precision. They could no longer be victimized because they spotted manipulation from miles away and dismantled it before it could take root. They didn't just heal, they became immune to psychological abuse, while still capable of deep love and connection. In his private notes, Jung wrote, "I have observed the development of compassion paired with wisdom. These individuals are among the most psychologically powerful people I have ever encountered." Stage 4, return to service. They didn't grow cold or detached. They became selectively generous with their gifts, using them to help other empaths transform. They began forming what Jung described as networks of psychologically resilient individuals. Jung's work revealed something radical. Empaths weren't mentally ill. They were evolutionarily advanced, born into systems designed to exploit their gifts. He stopped seeing sensitivity as a flaw to be cured and began treating it as a rare psychological capability, something to be understood, protected, and ethically guided. But he also recognized the danger. In the wrong hands, an integrated empath could be devastating. Shadow integration without ethics could turn them into master manipulators. To safeguard against this, Jung outlined what I call the ethical integration model, documenting how the healthiest awakened empaths instinctively use their powers for healing, not harm. He guarded this research fiercely. He knew that if the wrong people learned how to deliberately trigger empathic transformation, it could be weaponized. Jung scattered his findings across private journals, never publishing the full picture in his lifetime. Jung's final notes on these cases revealed something rare, something beautiful. These individuals lived the rest of their lives as what I call balanced warriors, capable of immense gentleness toward those who earned it, and unshakable strength against those who threatened it. They became living templates for what Jung believed could be humanity's next evolutionary step. People who could feel everything without being destroyed by it, see everything without becoming cynical, and love deeply without losing themselves. Near the end of his career, Jung wrote of them, "The empath's journey is not from sensitivity to numbness, but from unconscious absorption to conscious choice." They did not become less empathetic. They became perfectly empathetic. And he left one warning for future psychologists. Never underestimate someone who has learned to trust their own perceptions completely, because the awakened empath may be psychology's most powerful evolution. If you've reached the point where you trust your intuition without question, you know this truth. I no longer doubt what I see and feel. Modern research has confirmed what Jung's cases showed decades ago. Empaths who undergo shadow integration become psychologically invincible. They can't be gaslit because they trust their perceptions absolutely. They can't be manipulated because they see the emotional game before it's fully formed. They can't be broken because they've already been to the bottom and climbed out stronger. And here's why his findings remain eternally relevant. Every empath will face a moment of transformation, a betrayal so deep it forces a choice: remain a victim or become sovereign. The question isn't if the empath will snap, it's how they will transform, consciously integrating their shadow, as Jung's cases did, or letting it consume them destructively. Jung's research revealed that most, when pushed to the brink, choose integration. They don't become cruel. They become precise. They don't lose their hearts. They grow backbones. The transformed empath becomes what Jung called love with boundaries. A person who can care deeply, yet protect themselves absolutely. And his final insight still echoes through psychology today. They don't become different people. They become who they always were, beneath the conditioning. Every empath carries the potential to become psychologically untouchable. It only takes the right catalyst, usually betrayal, to awaken it. Jung once wrote, "The empath's greatest tragedy isn't their sensitivity. It's how long they wait to honor it properly." And that brings us full circle, back to the pattern he called the most terrifying transformation in human nature. Because these weren't isolated cases. They revealed a fundamental truth about empathy itself. Empaths are not naturally victims. They are naturally powerful. Society simply trains them to suppress that power in the name of being acceptable. When they snap, they are not breaking. They are awakening to abilities they've possessed all along. The truth manipulators don't want you to know is this: the kindest people are often the strongest, because kindness without strength enables dysfunction. The awakened empaths Jung documented were evolution in action. Individuals who could feel everything and choose everything with full consciousness. Decades of observation taught him this. The empath's journey is not about becoming less sensitive. It's about becoming consciously sensitive. And consciousness, Jung realized, is what transforms a victim into a force of nature. The most beautiful part of all? These transformed empaths never lost their capacity for love. They simply learned to love themselves as fiercely as they once loved others. If you're an empath reading this, remember Jung's essential discovery. Your sensitivity is not your weakness. It is your weapon. And the day you wield it consciously is the day you become truly powerful. Not dangerous to the innocent, but dangerous to those who would exploit your gifts. That is exactly what the world needs more of. Empaths who know their worth, trust their perceptions, and refuse to dim their light for anyone's comfort. Jung left us with one final question. Not if empaths will transform, but whether they will do it consciously or let life force it upon them. If you're ready for conscious transformation, say it now. I choose conscious transformation. Because the world does not need more broken empaths. It needs more awakened ones. And Jung's research proves that transformation is not only possible, it is inevitable. The empath will snap. The only question is, will you direct that power, or will it direct you? Thanks for watching. See you in the next dimension.